I woke before even the faintest suggestion of morning brushed the sky, before the crows cawed, before the domes of the city caught their first whisper of light, before even thought had fully formed its language inside me. There was only silence, ancient and alive, hanging in the air like a veil between worlds. It was not the kind of silence born from absence, but the kind that thrums with a presence so vast and intimate that it silences even the mind. I lay there in the quiet cradle of my chambers, the woven blanket still draped across my legs, and I felt something shift, not around me, but within me. It was soft, yet unmistakable, as if a thread woven into the fabric of my being had begun to tug gently, not to unravel me but to gather me inward. It was a pull, like gravity, but more delicate, an invisible current that stirred beneath the ribs, behind the breastbone, somewhere deep in that sacred hollow the poets never name. At first, I mistook it for the remnants of a dream, for the soul's language often speaks clearest in the hours when the world sleeps. But it did not fade as dreams do. It grew stronger, more insistent in its quietude. I could feel it, round, luminous, alive, like a moon rising behind my sternum. It did not shine outward, not yet. It was inward-facing, illuminating corridors of self I had forgotten existed. And the strangest thing was, I did not fear it. I did not question it. I only listened. And in that listening, I remembered a truth I had always known, that the soul carries within it a longing not imposed by the world, but born of it. A longing not for achievement, nor even peace, but for reunion, with the divine, with the vastness, with the beloved that lives behind the veil of this ordinary life. I sat up slowly, reverently, as if rising inside a shrine. The room was cloaked in shadow, the edges of the furniture softened by the absence of light. My feet met the earth with the weightlessness of a leaf settling on water. I did not reach for my robe. I did not look for the oil lamp. I simply moved, drawn by something older than decision. My hands knew their way through the dark. I lit a single candle, and its flame flared to life, casting soft golden halos on the nearby walls. The light did not chase away the darkness. It entered it like a respectful guest, just as the moonlight inside me was not replacing my humanity, but entering it, inhabiting it, like spirit entering form. I made tea with slow, deliberate hands. Each motion felt like a sacred act, the water pouring into the kettle, the fire licking beneath it, the scent of leaves releasing themselves to the heat. Even the rising steam felt like a prayer, lifting toward a heaven not above, but within. I held the cup between both palms, not drinking, only feeling its warmth. The warmth, the silence, the inner light, they all met in that single moment, and I could no longer distinguish between them. I sat by the narrow window, gazing into the garden shrouded in pre-dawn mist. The branches of the fig tree hung motionless, and the fountain lay stilled, caught between the breath of night and the exhale of morning. I could feel it all breathing with me. And still, the pull continued. Not harshly. Not demanding. It did not call me to move or speak or act. It asked only that I feel it. That I allow it. That I let go of everything else, ideas of who I am, memories of yesterday, expectations of today. It wanted no effort from me. It wanted surrender. Not to an outside power, but to an inner knowing. This moon in my chest, what else could it be but the hidden face of God, resting quietly in the silence behind my ribs? I thought then of how often we ignore such moments. How the world teaches us to be vigilant outwardly, to chase, to strive, to build lives from plans and walls and outcomes. And yet, here was a path forming within me, made not of stone but of subtle light. A path that whispered instead of spoke, that asked not for speed but for stillness. How long it had been drawing me, I did not know. Perhaps it had been pulling me since birth, through every joy and sorrow, waiting for this moment when I would finally be quiet enough to notice. It was not a voice. It was not even a feeling. It was a presence. A presence that said, "Come." I drank the tea slowly, each sip a joining of outer warmth and inner glow. I was not thinking now. I was not planning. I was only being. My breath had aligned itself with some older rhythm, a rhythm that did not belong to me, but was me. I could feel it now, not just as a light within, but as a direction, a gravity that would guide the rest of my life if only I dared to follow. It did not promise comfort. It did not offer answers. But it offered truth. And the beauty of truth is that it does not argue. It only waits, glowing softly, like the moon behind the clouds. The world outside remained asleep, and for once, I did not feel apart from it. I felt part of something deeper, some current beneath the tide of the visible. I was not called to rise and act, not yet. I was only called to listen. And as I closed my eyes and pressed my hand to my chest, I felt the moon within me pulsing with its silent song. And I knew this was the beginning. The beginning of a path not paved with stone, but with presence. Not mapped with ink, but etched into the stars. I did not know where it would lead, but I knew now, with the surety of breath, I must follow it. Let myself be silently drawn toward the pull of the moon in my chest. As the first light began its slow descent into the courtyard, I stepped outside as though crossing a sacred threshold, not just from room to garden, but from thought into presence, from surface into depth. The air held a kind of reverent stillness, the kind that only exists at the edge of morning, when the world has not yet remembered itself. The stones beneath my feet were cool and damp, kissed by the breath of the night that had just passed. Each step I took sent a quiet echo into the chamber of the earth, and for a moment, I imagined that the earth was listening. And I was listening too. Not with my ears, but with something older and softer inside me, a listening that had no need for sound. The pull in my chest, that secret moonlight I had felt stirring in the hours before dawn, had not faded with the arrival of day. If anything, it had grown fuller, more present, as though the light of the sky was a mirror meant to remind me of the light within. It was not loud. It did not demand. It drew me with the patience of eternity. I moved through the garden as though in a dream woven not from sleep, but from waking remembrance. My fingers brushed against the petals of unopened roses, and I could feel their stillness, their trust, their quiet readiness to bloom when the time was right. I wondered if I was not unlike them, closed still, but trembling at the edge of becoming. The cypress tree that I passed daily now stood before me like a sentinel of silence. Its tall, slender frame rose into the brightening sky, unmoving, eternal. I reached out without thinking and placed my palm against its bark. My hand did not feel separate from the tree. There was no division. In that moment, I was not a man touching wood. I was something older, something essential, communing with the spirit of a being who had known centuries of moonlight. The bark was rough, and beneath it, I imagined rivers of sap rising slowly toward branches that reached out like prayers. I pressed my forehead gently against it and closed my eyes. The moon in my chest responded again, its glow pulsing in harmony with something vast and rooted. I breathed with the tree. And in doing so, I breathed with the world. The garden revealed itself not in new sights, but in new awareness. Everything was alive, everything was waiting, everything was part of this great unfolding. The breeze moved like a lover, tenderly parting leaves and waking branches with caresses that no eye could see. The vine of jasmine curled along the stone wall like a line of poetry written by the night itself. I noticed small things, dewdrops clinging to petals, ants tracing invisible highways across the garden stones, the gentle sway of the fig tree's broad leaves as if nodding in rhythm with a music only they could hear. And I, no longer Rumi the thinker, the speaker, the teacher, stood simply as a witness. No role. No name. Only presence. I moved to the old wooden bench by the dry fountain, a place where I had often sat to write or think or read. But today, I brought no pen, no book. I brought only myself, and the quiet radiance that had been growing in my chest like a hidden dawn. I sat down slowly, letting my spine settle into alignment with the earth below and the sky above. The world did not ask anything of me. It only welcomed me. It had always been welcoming me, but I had been too full of words, of thoughts, of questions to feel it. Now, with everything stilled within me, I could finally hear what had been calling, not with sound, but with presence. I gazed at the marigold blooming beside the bench. Its small petals were golden, a quiet flame reaching toward a sky not yet fully blue. It tilted ever so slightly toward the horizon, where the first faint colors of dawn stretched like threads being woven into the day. I watched the marigold as one might watch a sacred ritual, and I asked it nothing. I only watched. And somehow, in that simple attention, I understood something deeper than knowledge. The flower was not trying to grow. It was simply becoming. It did not force itself toward light. It allowed the light to draw it forth. Just as I now allowed the moon within my chest to draw me forward, not in a direction, but into being itself. My breath deepened, becoming slower, fuller. Each inhale was a gathering, each exhale a letting go. The moonlight within me glowed with a gentleness that seemed to reach beyond my body, beyond the boundaries of skin and self. It touched everything, the soil, the leaves, the sky, the silence. It wasn't mine. It was me. And yet it belonged to the same source that moved the stars, that stirred the oceans, that brought flame to the candle and scent to the rose. I closed my eyes again, but now there was no separation between inside and outside. The garden was within me. The tree was within me. The marigold, the stone, the sky, the silence, all of it moved through me as breath moves through a flute. And the moon, the pull I had felt since before waking, was no longer a distant call. It was the very pulse of my being, the center of everything I had ever longed for. It was then that I realized I had spent so much of my life trying to find the path, trying to name it, shape it, follow it. But the path was not something I could choose. It had already chosen me. The only thing left was surrender. And in that surrender, I did not lose myself. I returned to myself. I was not led away from the world, but into its hidden heart. And in that heart, I found a stillness that pulsed with life. A light that glowed without needing to be seen. A moon that had always been there, waiting patiently, quietly, for me to stop running long enough to feel its pull. I opened my eyes as the first bird began to sing. Its voice was not loud, but it was enough to stir the morning into motion. And still, the pull within me remained, not demanding, not fading, but steady. I bowed my head, not in ritual, not in prayer, but in gratitude. And I whispered, not aloud but within, yes. I will follow. Wherever you lead, I will follow. And the moon inside me answered with silence. Not empty, but full. Not final, but eternal. The light that filtered into my study did not demand to be noticed. It crept softly along the stone walls, tracing the spines of books, dancing quietly across the curves of an old brass lamp. It was a light familiar to me, the kind that had accompanied many of my mornings, but today it did not serve merely as an illumination of space. It revealed something else entirely, the emptiness of what once felt full. I stood just inside the doorway, letting my eyes rest on the sacred disorder of the room. Papers lay scattered, pages half-written and forgotten in the eagerness of another idea. Scrolls wrapped in silk sat in bundles upon the shelves, each one containing lines I had bled for, thought over, revised, refined. And yet now, none of them called to me. Not because I had ceased to love them, but because I had outgrown what they had given me. Or perhaps, more truthfully, I had descended into a layer of myself too deep for their words to reach. I lowered myself to the floor with deliberate stillness, the rug beneath me warm from the memory of sunlight. My legs crossed instinctively, as they always did, as if my body knew what my mind had not yet remembered. I sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by the echoes of past insights, and placed both hands gently over my heart. The pull was still there. That quiet moon, that inward tide, gentle and immense. Its gravity did not wane. It did not flicker like thought. It held, constant and ancient, like the steady hum of the universe itself. I had once believed the mind to be the crown of my existence. I had honored it, fed it, glorified its abilities to analyze and arrange and understand. I had made a temple of my thoughts. But now, sitting here in the silence, with the moon inside me glowing softly like a sacred fire, I saw that the mind was only a lantern, useful, beautiful even, but never the source of the flame. The flame was elsewhere. The flame had always been elsewhere. And now that I had stopped clinging to the lantern, I could finally feel its warmth. The verses I had written in the night still lay before me, ink not yet fully dried. I leaned forward and read the last few lines, hearing my own voice in them, distant like a bird calling across a canyon. They were not untrue. No. They were sincere, full of longing, full of my yearning to understand the beloved, to catch even a glimpse of the divine veil. But I could see now that those words were not the moonlight. They were merely its reflection in water, shimmering, yes, but always moving, always distorted by the current of thought. The moon itself was stillness. The truth I now felt did not need poetry to exist. It needed only my surrender. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply. The room vanished. The shelves, the papers, the pen, all of them dissolved into the periphery. My breath grew longer, slower, deeper, until even that became transparent. What remained was presence, quiet, boundless, wordless. The light in my chest grew stronger, not brighter, but fuller, as though it had been waiting for this exact moment of emptying. And within that fullness, I saw a truth so simple it brought tears to my eyes. I was not separate. I had never been separate. Not from this light. Not from the divine. Not from the sky, the trees, the strangers I passed in the market. All of it, all of them, all of me, we were made of the same moonlight. The same silence. The same breath. There was a joy in that realization so profound it frightened me at first. It was not the joy of elation or achievement, not the joy that comes with success or praise. It was the joy of dissolving. The joy of not needing to be anything, to prove anything, to explain anything. The joy of being only this breath, this presence, this flicker of the eternal moving briefly through the shape of a man named Rumi. I bowed forward until my forehead touched the earth. Not in obedience, but in intimacy. It felt as though I was kissing the skin of the beloved, as though the stone beneath me held the heartbeat of the cosmos. I remained like that for a long time, maybe hours, maybe minutes, I did not know. Time had lost its sharp edges. It no longer moved in minutes and hours, but in tides and stillnesses. When I finally lifted myself, I did not feel enlightened or awakened or transformed. I felt bare. As if the layers I had carefully wrapped around myself over the years, the teacher, the scholar, the speaker of fine verses, had slipped away, and what remained was simply a man with a moon inside his chest, listening to its pull. I no longer wished to teach. I no longer wished to write. I only wished to listen, to follow, to let this inner tide shape me. The mind protested faintly, like a bird fluttering in the distance, asking, "But what will you do now?" And I smiled, because the answer was not one the mind could hold. It wasn't a plan, a profession, or a philosophy. It was a vow, a silent, inward vow to walk wherever this moonlight led me, even if it led me away from everything I had built, even if it led me into uncertainty, into solitude, into madness. I stepped outside again, and the world had changed, not because it had altered, but because I had. The sunlight touched the earth more gently. The breeze that moved through the olive branches seemed to carry messages not in words, but in presence. The birds did not sing, they prayed. The earth beneath my feet did not support me, it embraced me. And within it all, the moon continued to glow, drawing me inward, downward, homeward. I did not know where the path would lead. But I knew this, I had ceased to search with the mind. I had begun to follow with the soul. And from that day forward, everything, every word I spoke, every silence I honored, every step I took, would be guided by that quiet pull. The pull of the moon in my chest. The pull that asked nothing but trust, nothing but surrender, nothing but to follow without needing to know. The day had begun in stillness, and yet as I moved through it, the stillness did not leave me. It deepened. I walked not as one who was traveling from place to place, but as one who was being peeled open with every step. The streets were busier now, the fruit sellers calling out prices, donkeys clattering along the stone alleys, the rhythm of footsteps and negotiations building like a tide, but even amidst that rising noise, I felt I was inside a silence untouched by it all. It was as if the moon within me had wrapped itself around my senses, not to dull them, but to heighten them with softness. The ordinary world revealed its hidden layers, each sound, each face, each motion laced with something sacred, something shining just beneath the surface. I had passed through these places countless times before, yet I had never truly seen them. A group of young students sat cross-legged in a shaded corner beside the mosque's outer wall. Their teacher was speaking slowly, carefully, pointing to lines from a worn manuscript. I paused to listen. They were discussing the nature of divine justice, unraveling layers of meaning from the sacred text with such fervor that their voices trembled. I recognized the hunger in their eyes. It was the same hunger I had once carried, the need to know, to define, to understand the divine through the mind's lens. But now, standing there in the sun's gentle weight, I understood that truth is not something that is captured. It is not hunted like prey. It is courted like a lover, slowly, wordlessly, through presence, through surrender. One of the boys glanced up and saw me. He nudged his friend. The teacher followed their gaze and met my eyes. Recognition flickered between us. We had met before, years ago, when I had lectured in that very courtyard. I had spoken then with passion and precision, citing the mystics and scholars, weaving arguments with poetic fire. But now, I had no desire to speak. I merely bowed my head in respect, and the teacher nodded in return. Something unspoken passed between us, an understanding, perhaps, that there is a knowing beyond books, beyond language, and that we were both, in our different ways, in pursuit of it. I moved on, letting the movement itself be a kind of prayer. I passed a shop where a blind man sat on a low stool carving wooden flutes. His hands moved with the certainty of someone who did not need to see with eyes. The shavings of wood curled around his feet like petals. I stood and watched him, mesmerized by the grace of his work, the way he tilted his head to listen to the sound the wood made as he hollowed it out. I wondered what music would one day pass through that flute, what invisible breath would bring it to life. And in that moment, I understood something more deeply than ever before. We are all flutes. We are carved and shaped by life, hollowed out in places we once held firm. And it is only when we are emptied, when we surrender our own voice, that the breath of the beloved can pass through us and create music the world has never heard. I turned and walked toward the outskirts of the city, where the buildings thinned and the open sky began to stretch its arms more freely above the earth. There, the noise faded. A grove of almond trees welcomed me with their delicate leaves trembling in the breeze. I walked between them slowly, touching their trunks, letting my fingertips trail over the rough bark. The wind stirred their branches gently, and I listened, not to the sound of wind alone, but to what the wind carried. A kind of hush. A kind of ancient whisper that spoke not to the years, but to the place beneath the years. I sat on a stone near the edge of the grove and closed my eyes. The moon in my chest pulsed again, steady, quiet, alive. And it was here, surrounded by trees and sky, that I felt the boundary between myself and the world begin to dissolve. My breath slowed. The thoughts in my mind faded like clouds drifting out of frame. What remained was sensation, not of the body, but of being. I was no longer Rumi the man. I was the space between trees. I was the warmth of the sun against stone. I was the shadow of the branch stretching across the earth. I was the silence itself. And in that silence, I heard her. Not with my ears, but with the center of my being. She did not speak with words. She did not approach with form. She was presence. She was nearness. She was the moonlight itself, no longer a feeling in my chest, but a being whose gravity shaped the inner tides of my soul. She did not need to be named, but if I had to name her, I would call her love. I wept, not out of sadness, not even from joy, but from the sheer immensity of being touched by something so vast, so intimate. The tears came without struggle, like spring water rising from stone. I let them fall. I did not wipe them away. I did not try to understand them. I simply let them be, just as I had learned to let myself be. And as I wept, the moon in my chest grew still, not because it had disappeared, but because it had expanded. It was no longer contained within me. It was everywhere. In the soil, in the sky, in the breath of the trees, in the heartbeats of the strangers I had passed. I saw clearly, as though a veil had been pulled back, there is no separation. There never was. We are all vessels of the same light. We are all drawn by the same moon. We are all walking, in our own ways, toward the same beloved, who is not distant, but already here. I remained there as the sun arced above, casting shifting shadows through the branches. Birds came and went. A fox appeared at the edge of the grove, watched me with still eyes, then disappeared without sound. The world moved, but I remained, still inside, present, listening. And with each breath, I followed the pull. Not forward. Not outward. Inward. Downward. Comeward. And I knew, with the kind of knowing that cannot be taught, I was no longer seeking the path. I was the path. I was no longer waiting for truth. I was walking in it. I was no longer reaching toward the moon. I was carrying it. Or rather, it was carrying me. The walk back from the almond grove was not a return. It was a continuation of something that had no beginning and no end. My feet touched the same stones, my robe brushed the same shrubs that had swayed at my passing earlier, but now I was not the same. Or perhaps I had only now become what I truly was, what I had always been beneath the names, beneath the teachings, beneath the endless recitations. The air around me no longer felt separate from the air within me. There was no boundary between the world and myself. I was not walking through it, I was part of it, as intimately as breath is part of lungs. And within me, that moon, silent, radiant, unwavering, continued its pull, not with urgency but with inevitability. It did not command me to move. It simply reminded me that I was movement. As I re-entered the city, the late morning had spilled itself fully across the streets. The bustle was louder now, merchants called out with open palms, mothers moved with practiced grace, children's laughter soared like birds between the buildings. But I did not feel crowded. I did not feel interrupted. It was as though every sound was part of a single note being played by the day itself, and that note resonated with the frequency of the light in my chest. I walked slowly, the way one walks in a dream where everything is deeply real. I looked into faces, not to see who they were, but to see what they were. Each pair of eyes I met held a window. Some veiled with fatigue, some dulled by habit, but some were wide open, and in them I saw the same light I carried. An old man sat at the edge of the spice market, hunched beneath a faded blue cloth. His hands were calloused, his fingers curled as if still holding the memory of labor. I approached him and sat beside him without a word. He did not look at me, but I knew he felt my presence. We remained there, side by side, two strangers breathing beneath the same sun, saying nothing. And in that shared silence, something passed between us, like a current of recognition, as though his silence knew mine and bowed to it. When I finally stood to go, he turned his head just slightly, and his lips moved, not to form a word, but to release a breath. And in that breath, I heard a blessing. Not in language, but in being. I continued on, drawn toward the outer edge of the city where the orphanage stood. It had been some time since I last visited, and something within me now pulled in that direction, not as a task, but as a calling. The courtyard gates were open, as they often were during the day, and I slipped in without announcing myself. The sound of laughter rang out from the far side where the fig trees grew thick and leafy. Children darted through the branches like sparrows, their robes catching on twigs, their joy wild and unshaped. I watched from a distance at first, leaning against the stone wall, and simply listened, not just to the noise they made, but to the soul of it. It was pure, unfiltered, full of the same unnameable longing that pulses in every being before it is taught to quiet itself. One of the boys noticed me and shouted something unintelligible to the others. They turned and came rushing forward, a tide of dust and laughter. They gathered around me, hands tugging at my robe, some shouting, some asking if I had brought stories, others simply standing and staring as though unsure whether I was truly there. I smiled and lowered myself onto the warm ground as they formed a loose circle around me. One girl with eyes as dark as olives placed her tiny hand in mine and asked, "Will you tell us something?" I looked into her eyes and saw no child, no age, only the same moonlight I had come to know. I nodded and said softly, "Not a story with words. A story with silence." They were confused at first. They giggled. They wriggled. But I closed my eyes and placed my hand upon my heart. Slowly, without being asked, they did the same. I could feel the change in the air as their movements stilled, their breath softened. The noise of the world fell away. In that space, in that stillness, something began to open among us, like a door none of us had known was there. We sat there, in a circle of dusty children and sun-warmed stones, breathing into that silence. And for a moment, maybe a minute, maybe eternity, we all entered the same place. The same depth. The same pulse. When I opened my eyes, I saw that some of them were watching me in wide-eyed awe. But others had their eyes closed still, as if not ready to leave whatever they had just touched. And I realized the moon within my chest had found its reflection in them. Not just in their silence, but in their innocence, their ability to be fully present without fear, without the burden of needing to know why. They were already nearer to the truth than many learned men. They did not yet resist the pull. They trusted it. As I stood to go, they gathered around me again, hugging my legs, clutching at my sleeves, asking when I would return. I gave no answer. I placed my hands upon each head that reached toward me, and in my silence, I gave them the only promise I could offer, that I would remember them, because they were part of this journey, because they too had guided me, because their moon and mine had touched. Walking back through the city, I felt no separation from anything. The calls of the vendors, the glint of sunlight on brass trays, the fluttering of pigeons from rooftop to rooftop, it all moved within the same breath. And within me, the moon remained constant. Its light was not fixed in my chest alone, it spilled into my limbs, into my gaze, into the way my feet touched the earth. I felt no need to speak, no need to teach, no need to act. I only needed to be. And in that being, everything was already full. Everything was already whole. The pole within me had become the path itself. I was no longer walking toward something. I was walking as something ancient, something tender, something unnamed. I was not being led by ambition or fear or even devotion. I was being drawn by love. Not the love of a person or a thing, but the love that exists before form, before name. The love that is the original movement, the first breath, the eternal return. And so I walked, letting the world open itself to me as I opened to it. Letting the moon in my chest guide me not to answers, but to presence. Not to destinations, but to depth. Not to glory, but to grace. The sun climbed higher, its rays spilling like molten gold over the ancient city, turning every stone and tile into a shimmering mosaic of light and shadow. The warmth was both comforting and invigorating, but it was the quiet moonlight within me that truly sustained my being, a steady, unwavering flame that did not waver with the shifting hours of the day. It was a light both subtle and profound, not blinding, but illuminating in the deepest sense, a light that revealed without demanding, that guided without force. This quiet radiance beckoned me now, a gentle invitation to venture deeper into the heart of presence and surrender. Drawn by this inner moonlight, I found myself moving toward the river that wound through the city like a silken thread, both a boundary and a bond between land and sky, past and present. The water's surface caught the sunlight and fractured it into 1,000 dazzling sparks, each dancing upon the gentle current as if alive with a secret joy. The river, with its ceaseless flow, was a living poem written in light and motion, its verses sung not with words but with rhythm and grace. Walking beside it, I felt the pulse of the water echo within my chest, the same silent song that had begun to stir in my soul. As I traced the riverbank, the reflections captured my attention, the bending of trees and the flight of birds mirrored perfectly in the shimmering depths. The surface held them all, sky and earth, light and shadow, in a delicate balance, moving forward without resistance or effort. Watching this, I reflected on how often I had struggled like a stone cast into the water, battling currents of doubt and desire, sinking beneath waves of fear and clinging to what I thought would anchor me. Now, I was learning to be the river itself, to flow and yield, to embrace the unknown with a heart open and free. Nearby, a small group of fishermen mended their nets, their hands steady and practiced despite years of toil. Their faces told stories of sun and salt, of hardships endured and small victories celebrated. One man looked up and met my gaze, and in that moment, I felt the recognition of a shared journey. There was a moonlight within him as well, a quiet pull towards something beyond the daily grind, a silent yearning for a truth too vast for words. His smile was brief but sincere, a nod of kinship between two travelers drawn by the same inner light. I settled upon a smooth stone near the water's edge, letting the river's soft murmur fill the space around me. Closing my eyes, I breathed deeply, syncing my rhythm to the water's ebb and flow. The moon inside me expanded, filling the hollow spaces of my being, radiating warmth and calm that softened the edges of my mind's restless chatter. I sensed that this river's endless journey was a mirror for my own, the continuous unfolding of life through surrender, trust, and the mystery of becoming. Within this stillness, a question arose, not one of confusion or doubt, but a quiet, heartfelt inquiry. How do I truly let go? How can I surrender without losing the essence of who I am? The moonlight answered not with words but with a sensation, a vast, embracing presence that held both the desire to grasp and the courage to release. I understood then that surrender was not defeat but a sacred dance of trust and freedom. To follow the pull of the moon in my chest was to be invited into this dance, to move gracefully with the unseen rhythms that guide all existence. The river's song shifted, deepening as memories surfaced, faces of loved ones long gone and those still near, moments of joy intertwined with sorrow, wounds that had marked my journey. I allowed these memories to flow through me without resistance, feeling the moonlight soften their sharp edges, transforming pain into quiet strength and wisdom. The wounds were no longer prisons but portals, places where light entered, where the water touched earth and sparked new life. Opening my eyes, I watched a single leaf float by, drifting effortlessly on the current's gentle embrace. It moved neither hurriedly nor hesitantly but perfectly in tune with the flow. I yearned to be like that leaf, to surrender so fully that the path became the journey, and the journey itself became home. The moon within me seemed to respond, steady and sure, a silent promise that I was already on this path, already being carried by the current even when the destination remained unseen. As the sun reached its zenith, I rose from the riverbank, feeling both the warmth of the day and the enduring light within. Walking back toward the city, I carried with me the river's lesson, that life is not a battle to be fought or a mountain to be conquered, but a flow to be entered and trusted. To follow the moon's pull in my chest is to embrace mystery with open arms, to dance with the unseen forces that shape us, and to find freedom in surrender. Each step I took felt infused with new life and meaning. I was no longer separate from the world but a living part of its eternal dance. The moonlight within me was no longer a distant glow but a living flame, guiding me gently and silently toward the heart of all that is, toward the very source of love and being. The afternoon melted slowly into a golden haze, the sun casting its warm, honeyed light across the ancient stones and narrow alleys of the city. Every surface shimmered with the quiet glow of late day, a soft, almost sacred illumination that seemed to dissolve the boundaries between earth and sky, between the visible and the unseen. I walked without haste, my feet touching the familiar paths, but my spirit carried far beyond them by the silent pull of the moon within my chest. This pull was unlike any force I had known, a gentle, unyielding invitation to journey inward, into a realm beyond the reach of thought, beyond the constraints of time and noise. It was not a summons that demanded action or effort, but a tender urging that drew me closer to the very core of my being, where the heart could listen deeply and the spirit could breathe freely. As I moved through the winding streets, the city itself seemed to transform around me. The faces of those I passed were no longer mere glimpses of strangers but windows into vast, unfolding stories. Each countenance was a testament to life's myriad complexities, a woman carrying a bundle of herbs whose hands told tales of toil and care, her eyes shadowed by sorrows unseen but deeply felt, a child chasing a stray cat, laughter spilling from his lips like the purest song, unburdened by the weight of the world, an old man resting quietly on a bench, his gaze distant yet infinitely knowing, touching the edges of eternity. In their eyes and gestures, I saw reflections of my own journey, the restless longing, the battles waged within, the slow surrender to the truth of what simply is. The moon's gentle tug led me toward the city's outer gardens, a sanctuary of green and shade that promised refuge from the clamor of daily life. Passing beneath arching branches heavy with ripening fruit, I inhaled deeply the fragrant air, rich with earth and blossoms, a balm for the spirit. The garden was a sacred pause, a breathing space where time softened and the pulse of life could be heard in its purest form. Finding a quiet nook beneath a broad fig tree, I settled upon the warm earth and closed my eyes, surrendering to the rhythm that flowed through everything, the beating of wings, the rustling of leaves, the endless hum of being alive. Within that stillness, I journeyed inward, drawn ever deeper by the moonlight that swelled and filled every hollow of my soul. It became clear that this pull was not a call to escape, to hide from the world's tumult, but a summons to union, to a sacred merging of self with other, of heart with cosmos. The moon did not beckon me away from life, it called me into life, with all its contradictions and wonders, its pain and beauty intertwined. To be drawn by this inner moonlight was to embrace the fullness of existence without reservation, to open myself to the mystery that flows beneath and through all that is. Suddenly, a fluttering movement caught my ear, a small bird dancing among the branches overhead. Its song was clear, unrestrained, a melody born of pure presence and unshaped joy. I listened as its notes wove through the still air, each one a reminder of the simplicity and depth of being itself. The bird did not struggle to sing or strive for perfection. It sang simply because it was, because it existed as part of the great unfolding. And in that moment, I understood that my own song need not be grand or flawless. It needed only to be authentic, born from the truth of my own heart. As shadows lengthened and the golden light softened into dusk, I remained beneath the fig tree, surrendering ever more deeply to the moon's quiet guidance. Memories rose like waves, moments of loss and longing, flashes of grace and transformation. I welcomed each one without resistance, holding them gently with compassion and understanding. The moonlight softened their sharp edges, weaving them into a tapestry of meaning that transcended pain and joy alike. In this sacred weaving, I found a profound peace, a knowing that every thread of my life was hallowed, every experience a step on the path toward wholeness. Around me, the city's evening sounds began to swell, the distant, haunting call to prayer, the playful laughter of children echoing through courtyards, the murmur of voices blending into a gentle chorus of life. Yet within me, the moon's light remained steady, a luminous thread stitching together the fleeting moments into a seamless whole. Rising slowly, I carried this inner light with me as I stepped back into the unfolding night. Walking beneath a sky now brushed with the faint shimmer of stars, I felt the moon inside me glow brighter, its silent pull more tender yet more compelling. It was a call to trust, to surrender without hesitation, to follow the unknown path with faith rather than certainty. This path was not marked by clear destinations or guarantees, but by the quiet courage to move forward, guided by the luminous thread woven deep within the heart. The city seemed to pulse with new life in the twilight, the shimmer of lanterns flickering against walls, the scent of jasmine carried on the breeze, the soft footfalls of late wanderers wrapped in thought and shadow. I was no longer separate from this living tapestry but deeply woven into it, each breath and step an expression of the moon's gentle gravity within me. Its light did not demand or compel. It invited me into a dance of surrender and awakening, a dance in which every moment held the potential for revelation. I walked slowly, each step an offering, each pause a prayer. The moon's pull was not a rush but a steady current, leading me toward a home I had always known yet had forgotten, the home of stillness, presence, and unshakable love. And as the night deepened and stars emerged like scattered jewels in the velvet sky, I understood that this journey was endless and perfect, a sacred unfolding that needed nothing more than my trust. The moon within my chest no longer felt like a solitary flame but a radiant ocean, vast and infinite, carrying me gently on its tides toward the heart of all that is, where all fears dissolve and all longing finds its rest. The night had settled over the city like a silken veil, dark and soft, yet alive with the shimmer of 1,000 distant stars that scattered their faint, ancient light across the sky. Yet beneath this vast canopy of cosmos, within the depths of my own being, the moon shone with a quiet radiance far more potent than any star. It was a gentle flame, steady and unwavering, pulsing with a depth that was at once intimate and infinite. As I walked beneath the embrace of the night, the cool air kissed my skin with a delicate tenderness, as if carrying the breath of some unseen presence. The moon's pull inside me grew stronger, guiding me deeper, not away from the world, but into the very heart of it, into the secret places where light and shadow meet and dance. The streets lay hushed, touched by the soft glow of oil lamps and the occasional flickering candlelight spilling through curtained windows. The city seemed asleep, yet in that sleep, it breathed with a hidden life, a sacred song woven through the silence, an invisible melody only those who listen with their souls could hear. With every step I took, I became more acutely aware of the subtle interplay of light and darkness, not just around me, but within me. The moon inside my chest was no longer a distant beacon to be sought, but a living companion that moved with me, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always patient and sure. This pull was not about arrival or achievement, but about presence, a calling to be fully here, fully now, to surrender not out of weakness, but with the strength that comes from embracing life in its totality. Drawn onward, I found myself at the threshold of the old caravanserai, a place that had long welcomed travelers from distant lands, their footsteps and stories etched like invisible inscriptions on the worn stones. The heavy wooden doors stood ajar, inviting without demand. Crossing the threshold, I was wrapped in a cool silence thick with the scent of aged timber, earth, and forgotten memories. Moonlight poured from the open sky above, washing the cracked tiles in silver and casting the twisted vines that clung to the ancient walls into graceful, shifting shadows. Here, in this quiet sanctuary, the moon inside me expanded, filling every corner, every hollow, with a soft and luminous presence that spoke of timeless wisdom and endless possibility. Settling upon the cold stone floor, my back against the rough wall, I closed my eyes and let the world dissolve. Only the steady rhythm of my breath and the gentle pulse of the moon remained. Thoughts drifted like autumn leaves on a slow-moving stream, and I was carried beyond the confines of thought and knowing to a place where silence was not emptiness but fullness, where the heart spoke its own language in whispers and sighs. In this sacred stillness, the moon's pull revealed itself not as a command but as an invitation to authenticity, to shedding the veils and masks that conceal the true self, to standing naked in the raw, radiant truth of one's own being. Memories surfaced, not as weights but as gifts shimmering beneath the moon's gentle light, faces of loved ones long gone, moments of loss and healing intertwined, quiet victories carved into the tapestry of my path. I welcomed each without resistance, allowing the light to transform them into stones of strength and pillars of grace. Through this alchemy, a profound compassion blossomed, not just for myself but for all who walk this winding road of life, stumbling and rising, seeking and surrendering. Hours slipped by as a soft breeze stirred the vines overhead, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and myrrh. The night sky stretched endlessly, an immense canvas of mystery and wonder. Opening my eyes, I looked upward and felt the moon's light not only within me but all around, an infinite circle of connection binding me to the stars, to the earth, to every soul who dares to listen to the silent call of the heart. The moon's pull was no longer solitary. It was a shared current flowing through the veins of the cosmos and the hearts of all beings who have awakened to this sacred dance. Rising from the stone floor, I moved slowly back toward the city's heart. Each step was a prayer, each breath a hymn of gratitude. The night enfolded me like a mother's arms, tender and unwavering, reminding me that to be drawn by the moon in one's chest is to be invited into an eternal dance of grace, an endless spiral of surrender to the mystery within and without. This journey has no end, no final destination, only a sacred unfolding that draws us ever closer to the truth beneath our fears, stories, and passing shadows. Walking beneath the tapestry of stars, I felt the moonlight within me shine ever clearer, a beacon of love and presence calling me home. Home not to a place on any map, but to the heart itself, the boundless, radiant heart that pulses within all creation. And in that home, I found not solitude, but a sacred communion with all that is, was, and ever will be. The night deepened with a velvety darkness that enveloped the city in a hushed embrace, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any noise. Above me, the sky stretched endlessly, scattered with stars that twinkled like ancient fires kindled across the vastness of time. Yet it was not the distant lights of the heavens that drew me most, but the quiet moon glowing steadily within my chest, an unwavering flame that neither flickered nor waned, but pulsed gently with each heartbeat. This light was intimate and infinite all at once, a subtle radiance that offered guidance without force, a quiet song of presence and longing that intertwined in a dance as old as the cosmos itself. As I wandered through the sleeping streets, the silence surrounding me was not emptiness but a pregnant pause, a sacred space where the unseen and eternal whispered their secrets. It was a stillness thick with possibility, a quiet where the soul's ear could hear the soft murmur of truth beneath the clamor of the world. The moon's pull within me beckoned softly but insistently, guiding me deeper into the folds of night itself, not as a hurried call, but as a patient invitation to journey inward, to explore the hidden chambers of my being where light and shadow coexist in delicate balance. In this darkness, I felt that internal glow swell and spread, illuminating the neglected corners of my heart. There, I found wounds still tender, scars etched deep by moments of loss and pain, yet also hopes fragile and bright like newborn stars. Dreams, too, flickered there, sometimes faint, sometimes brilliant, always alive. But this light was not harsh or condemning. It was a balm, a compassionate presence that embraced every part of me without judgment. I realized then that following this pull was not about chasing perfection or fleeing discomfort, but about embracing the full spectrum of my humanity with grace and love. As I moved through the labyrinthine city, the environment itself seemed to breathe anew in the stillness of night. The ancient walls whispered stories to those who would listen, the cobblestones held the echoes of countless footsteps, and the wind carried with its scents of jasmine and cedar, fragrances soaked into the very air like memories woven into a tapestry. Pausing beside a small fountain nestled in a quiet courtyard, I knelt and cupped its cool water in my hands. The gentle murmur of the flowing water became a lullaby to my restless heart. The ripples mirrored the moon's light inside me, their endless dance a reminder that life itself is a ceaseless flow, a river that moves with patience and persistence, carrying me along even when stillness seems to reign. In that moment, a memory surfaced, a time when I had resisted the inevitable, when fear gripped tightly and silence became a wall rather than a refuge. I saw with clarity how much strength and energy had been wasted in that struggle, how many precious moments of beauty were missed while fighting what could not be controlled. The moonlight within softened the memory, transforming it into a gentle lesson written in shimmering light. I understood surrender anew, not as defeat or giving up, but as giving over with sacred trust. It is the willingness to be carried by the currents of life, even when the destination remains cloaked in mystery. Rising from the fountain's edge, I continued my wandering through the maze of alleys and open courtyards, each step an offering, each breath a meditation. The moon's light inside me was no blaze demanding attention, but a steady glow inviting gentleness and depth. I came upon a group of travelers resting beside a modest hearth, their faces illuminated by flickering flames. Their voices wove stories of faraway places and long journeys, tales heavy with longing and hope. I listened silently, feeling the pulse of their lives echo within my own, the shared human experience of wandering, seeking, and yearning for a place to call home. As the first pale blush of dawn crept across the eastern sky, softening the edges of night's mysteries, the moon's light inside remained steadfast, a quiet ember glowing deep within. I felt a profound peace settle into the core of my being, a connection to the eternal dance between light and shadow, presence and absence, longing and fulfillment. The moon in my chest had become more than a guide. It was a sanctuary, a sacred refuge where all parts of me, broken and whole, weary and joyful, could rest, heal, and be embraced fully. To be drawn by this light is to be invited into the deepest truth of existence, that darkness and light are inseparable threads woven into the fabric of life. We are not separate from the shadows we fear, but intimately entwined with them, and within those shadows, the light patiently waits, not to conquer, but to illuminate, to transform, and to love. This understanding wrapped around me like a cloak of compassion and courage. With the sun's gentle ascent now painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, I walked on beneath the awakening world. The stars faded, but the moonlight within me did not dim. It shone quietly but powerfully, a sacred ember carried close to my heart, an eternal reminder that surrender is not loss but the greatest gain. To follow this silent pull is to find the path leading not away from life, but into its deepest, most radiant center. It is a journey without end, a spiral ever unfolding toward love, presence, and the boundless home within. The first gentle light of dawn began its slow ascent, spilling across the horizon in soft ribbons of rose, amber, and lilac. The city, still swathed in the lingering embrace of night's cool mist, stirred tentatively as if awakening from a deep and sacred dream. Yet within the quiet chambers of my chest, the moon's light remained steadfast, a soft but unwavering flame that neither flickered nor waned in the face of morning's coming glory. It was a radiance both intimate and vast, a steady beacon that unfurled within me like a flower opening petal by petal, its gentle unfolding filled with infinite patience and grace. Standing at the threshold between night and day, I felt the cool breath of dawn brush tenderly against my skin, and in that sacred moment, I knew with unshakable certainty that this moon, the silent, luminous pole I had carried within me all along, was not merely a guide through darkness but a compass for every season of life. As the world began to rouse from its slumber, a deep gratitude swelled inside me, gratitude for the winding journey that had led me here, through shadowed valleys and radiant peaks, through moments of sorrow and joy, loss and healing. The moon had been my companion in all these travels, teaching me the sacred truth that surrender is not a giving up or a defeat but a profound yielding to the flow of existence itself. It is the sacred trust that beneath the surface of uncertainty, beneath the veil of mystery, lies an unshakable truth, timeless, patient, and full of love, waiting to be known and embraced. I understood then that the pull in my chest had been the call to come home, not to any physical place, but to the very heart of myself, to the source of all light, love, and being. Around me, the city stirred with quiet life. The soft murmur of footsteps echoed faintly against stone walls, the early calls of street vendors preparing their wares, the distant, sonorous ringing of a bell summoning the faithful to prayer. Yet within this unfolding world, I carried a stillness, a sanctuary built not of bricks or mortar, but of moonlight and silence. The lessons gathered from countless nights of wandering now glimmered like precious jewels within my soul. I saw with clarity how the moon's gentle pull had patiently undone the walls I had so carefully constructed around my heart, walls forged from fear, doubt, and the desperate yearning for control. Those walls, once towering and impenetrable, had softened and melted into dust beneath the patient, tender light, revealing the boundless space within where love could flow freely, unburdened by hesitation or fear. I moved slowly through the waking streets, feeling the sacred thread of earth beneath my feet, a living connection to the vast web of life that binds us all. Each breath became a prayer, each step a blessing offered to the unfolding day. The moon in my chest was no longer simply an inner light. It had become a living, breathing presence, a sacred force that moved with me, shaped me, and cradled me in its gentle embrace. I felt its pull draw me not only inward toward the depths of my own soul, but outward into a deeper communion with all that surrounds me. The whispering trees, the eternal river singing its ceaseless song, the countless faces of strangers whose eyes held reflections of my own longing and grace. In that sacred communion, I realized that to be drawn by the moon within is to be invited into a divine dance with the universe itself. It is an endless spiral of becoming, a dance in which surrender and freedom are partners entwined, where the heart opens wider with every step taken into the unknown. The moon's pull is a call to trust the invisible currents that guide our lives, to lean fully into the mystery with courage and openness, knowing that even when the path ahead is veiled, the inner light will always illuminate the way. This pull is not a destination but an eternal journey, a sacred unfolding that draws us ever closer to the essence of who we truly are beneath the masks, stories, and fleeting shadows. As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light across rooftops and filling the world with warmth, the moon's gentle glow within me remained steady, a beacon that would never fade or falter. It was a silent promise, a sacred covenant between my heart and the cosmos, assuring me that no matter where life's tides might carry me, I am held, I am known, and I am deeply loved. The moon's light reminded me that surrender is not the absence of strength but its highest expression, that to follow the pull of the moon within one's chest is to live a life aligned with the eternal rhythm of love, presence, and grace. With the dawn now fully breaking, the city alive and vibrant around me, I stepped forward into the new day carrying this quiet, radiant flame within my heart. It was a flame kindled by surrender, nurtured by trust, and destined to burn eternally in the sacred chamber of all that is, an unending light that would guide me through every night and every dawn yet to come.